with Senator Tester of Montana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the hospitality, and I want to thank you and the ranking member for holding this hearing, and I want to thank the folks who testified today. So, thank you for all for being here. It is clear that the management of these banks made poor decisions. They ignored risk factors, ultimately resulted in failure. It's also clear that the regulators weren't dropping the hammer on these banks, and the executives or the boards, even when the problems that supervisors had identified were not being addressed. These were problems that the executives knew about, but instead of addressing them, they gave themselves bonuses which should make everybody in this room's blood boil. Regulators and law enforcement must take steps to investigate actions of the former bank management. Those folks responsible must be held accountable to make sure that similar mistakes aren't made again, because if they're not addressed, they will be. Ms. Lynn, where are the gaps in our existing federal structure for holding these executives accountable? Are the laws there, or do we need to put more laws on the books?
Thank you, Senator. For the Prohibition and Removal Authority, as it is applied to bank executives and directors, senior bank leadership, there are important gaps that deter effective enforcement, effective use of this authority. The problems, in my opinion, are twofold. First is the culpability requirement, which requires regulators to show either personal dishonesty or a willful or continuing disregard for the safety or soundness of the institution. This demanding requirement broadly insulates directors and officers of large banks from liability or sanction because they can credibly deny knowledge of most operational details. The challenge of proving willful complicity increases as the distance to the wrongdoing, the wrongful activity, increases, especially when the misconduct relates to complex issues such as risk management.
So do you have recommendations on what this committee could do to make, to address those gaps?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, would love to get them. I'm gonna move on because I only got 5 minutes. Ms. Schooner, Professor Schooner, I should say, do you believe those gaps are there, and do you have recommendations if you believe there are gaps that you could give this committee? Give myself, the chairman, ranking member?
Senator, I agree with Professor Lynn that the standards for administrative enforcement are unduly high, requiring showing of reckless conduct, which especially with larger institutions is problematic.
Okay. Well, trust me, if you get them to me, I would love to see them. Mr. Quammen, are your views on sufficiency of federal regulators, law enforcement tools, what are your views on that to be able to hold executives accountable? You talked about in your opening statement that you thought they were there. You stand by those?
Yeah, we believe that the authorities were there. We don't believe that the regulators took effective action. We are actually looking forward to the hearings that you're going to have here, both with those executives as with Vice Chair Barr, and if there's information that comes about where maybe our views are going to change a little bit on that, we'll be happy to talk with you further.
I want to clarify a little bit. I'm not talking about the regulations that the banks are held to, because I think those regulations were there. The regulators had the ability to stop this from happening. They didn't drop the hammer. They did not. I'm talking about the regulators have the ability to hold the bank executives accountable.
So with the specific point that you raised at the start of your question about the bonuses that were paid, we need the information there because insider trading is illegal, right? 10b-5 is not a safe harbor.
I got you.
So we think that action should be taken. If it was inappropriate activity there, it should be, it should be handled then.
So I'm sure, and I appreciate that perspective, by the way, Mr. Quammen. I am sure that you probably looked at this situation, particularly with Silicon Valley Bank, like we did. I mean, all the signs were there. I mean, all the signs. Why do you think we haven't heard anything about clawing back or holding people accountable? Because I haven't heard a word about that.
I believe to some degree we're still in the investigatory stage with the different agencies that are there, and it takes a little bit of time.
Okay, I have one more question, and that deals with regulation moving forward. You know what? I've run out of time. I'll put it for the record. You were kind enough to let me go first. I do not want to hold up the.
Thanks.
I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
You guys are both pretty.
I'll yield you a minute of the chairman's time.
Will you? Okay.
Nice story.
So one of my concerns about the outcome of this, because the Fed report pointed out that the regulation was there to handle it, that the regulators did not enforce the regulation and hold people accountable. One of my concerns is that there will be a push to get more regulation. I think that's going to happen. I don't think it'll happen, but I think there will be a push for it. But my concern is similar to what happened in 2008, that the regulators will respond in a way where they put the screws to the banks who are following the rules, that the board is paying attention, that the executives are doing a good job. Do you see it the same way? And is there anything we can do to stop that? That's for Mr. Quadman.
First off, Senator, you're a small businessman,
Yep.
right? You understand how many of those banks work. And that's why I said, there was an esoteric model with the banks that we're talking about here. I do think with the Federal Reserve, I think there were several assertions made in the report without the data, which I think is troubling. There were certain assertions made about executive compensation and that need to do more. Let me just read for you page 75 of the report for a second, one sentence from the report, which contradicts some of what the assertions are, which is why I think your inquiries are going to be even more important. Supervisors' interviews with the Compensation Committee Chair, SVP, indicated that the Compensation Committee decided not to reduce incentive compensation despite the known weakness of the enterprise risk management program, fearing this would lead to the increased attrition of senior executives due to executives' compensation already being lower than peer firms. So there's already contradictory information even in that report, which I think we need more information on.
The only thing that I would just say is that this board of directors did not do their job. Their executives did not do their job. If they got paid minimum wage, they got overpaid. That's all.